Welcome. This is Libawik Lily Gurma from tourismlens.com, and you're listening to the Tourism Lens podcast. Whether remote working, vacationing, or settling abroad, more people than ever are traveling and having an impact on the places they visit, on the environment, but also on host communities. On this show, I sit down with global sustainability thinkers and advocates to discuss critical, thorny issues in tourism. They'll share ideas and solutions they use so we can all learn to be better tourism leaders and travelers. On today's episode, my guest Shivya Nath is here to tell us about the project that she's just co founded called Sustainable Cities. Sustainablecities.travel is a content hub and it is packed with ideas for eco friendly activities and meaningful ways to explore some of the major cities around the world, from London to Bangkok and more to come. So, we'll touch on that and we'll touch on whether travelers even know what sustainable travel means, whether the media landscape has shifted to tell more meaningful stories and what the challenges are there, and how sustainablecities.travel plans to deliver more locally driven content in collaboration with tourism boards. So stick around for this amazing conversation with Shivya Nath. Shivya, it's so great to have you on the Tourism Lens podcast, all the way from India. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Lily, for having me. Really excited to have this conversation.
Me too. Me too. So you have this new project called Sustainable Cities, a new platform. And from what I've seen, it's basically showcasing a number of cities around the world, and it's telling travelers what they can do that's eco-friendly. It's focused around eco-friendly activities. But tell me a little bit about the whole background of the project and how you see it evolving.
Right. So Sustainable Cities kind of came about last year when I was traveling in Scandinavia, and I was spending like a couple of weeks in Stockholm. And one would imagine that it's really easy to find, sustainable things to do in Stockholm that support the local people, minority businesses, as well as, environmentally friendly things. But I had a pretty tough time just, looking through all these blogs and looking on Google and Instagram and trying to find ideas. And then towards the end of my trip, I met a friend of mine who's been living in Stockholm for the last, I think, 15, 20 years. And I asked her for recommendations, and she just gave me like a laundry list of things that I wish I had more time to do. And so I felt like, if everyone had that friend who lived in the city, wouldn't it be really cool, to find ideas on how to travel better and support local businesses and so forth? And so I reached out to Keith from iAmbassador, who's been a friend for a really long time and who's been doing some great work in the travel space. And then we kind of decided to start a platform that makes it really easy for travelers to find ideas on sustainable travel. Basically gets recommendations from people who either live in the city or who are past travelers and have spent a significant amount of time in the city and they understand sustainability. And
Right.
then really, making it easy for travelers to find these ideas in one place.
Yeah, I love the concept of it, and it's surprising that it wouldn't be able. It's easy to find meaningful activities in Stockholm. I would have thought that would have been easy. Um, so, how do the writers on this platform of yours like? How do you find your writers, and how do stories qualify?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think when we started out the platform, we were pretty sure that we wanted our writers to be people who either grew up in the city or who have been living there for a long period of time. Because obviously, when you live there for so long, you have a much better view and perspective of the city. And also, what we often find in travel writing is that people parachute in for like a couple of days or a week, and then just have like a one-sided view of things and then write stories around those. And those are the stories we typically end up reading often on websites and blogs and publications and so on. And so we kind of wanted to challenge that narrative by asking people who are really local to these places to write their perspectives on what sustainability is for them in their cities. And then those are also insider recommendations, which are often harder to find for travelers looking for meaningful experiences. So that's the goal that we started out with, but we did find it a bit challenging to find 100% locals to write for us. So far it's been a mix of people who've
Yeah.
spent who are sustainability minded travelers and they've spent time there, but we would very much like the focus to be locals as we go forward. So right now, I would say it's about 50-50, but we hope that proportion changes to about 80-20
Hmm.
going forward.
I have to say, I was about to ask you about that because, just browsing the site, I mean, being somebody who's also been in the industry for a long time, I saw a lot of familiar names. And this is something that I've always wondered as well, separately, is, it's such an insular space. And how do we find folks who, like you said, know their backyard really well, know the sustainability issues there, and can make recommendations and write about them, but aren't necessarily the people that we know. And so I feel like, do you have a what are you working on a strategy to find new voices and to include fresh voices?
Yeah, so we're looking at a few different avenues. So the first is, working with DMOs, destination management organizations, because they obviously have like a bird's eye view of who's living in their cities and who are great storytellers or who are involved in the sustainability space. So that's one. The second, we are trying to tap our social networks. So, word really gets around pretty quickly. So we already have quite a few writers who've written to us from different parts of the world saying that, when you're ready to roll out XYZ city, we'd love to write for you. So we're hoping that people gradually over time will also find us and reach out to us. And then we're also trying to contact, for example, guides from different cities around the world. So these are people who've already been around, telling stories of their cities in a different way, and they tend to represent a much more local voice, and they also understand, what a traveler looks for when they travel to their city. So we're also trying to see if we can bring their stories digitally, rather than just having them, of course, like in person, it would be great for travelers to actually
Mm-hmm.
meet them and interact with them, but also bring their voices on the digital platform.
Yes. So, which cities have you found to be more difficult than others in terms of sourcing that content?
So currently we have about 7 cities on the website, and I would say Graz has been pretty hard. We have a lot of past, travelers who've been there and spent a lot of time there, and they've actually spent time looking at, locally run businesses and sustainable hotels and so forth. So a lot of those people, and I think those are the names that you're familiar with, that you've probably seen on the website. But we finally managed to establish contact with at least one local storyteller, like someone who grew up in Graz. So we're really looking forward to having them on the platform as well.
I'm going to come back to the word sustainable in a second. How will you be able to kind of stand out in the sea of content that's out there? Also about sustainability, and in particular with the role of AI lately. And how do you think that all fits together for you?
Yeah, yeah, AI is definitely the elephant in the room, and I'll get back to that in a little bit. Something that we're trying to do with the platform is that every story that goes onto the platform is defined by a certain number of parameters. So we've defined 14 parameters of what sustainable travel means to us. So that includes, for example, low carbon experiences, community supportive experiences, nature immersive experiences, and so forth. And then with each story, we highlight, front and center what these experiences are that you can expect to find in every specific story. And that's an answer to your earlier question as well. How does a story qualify to be on the platform? So every story meets at least 4 to 5 of these parameters, if not more. And so I think you're right. Like
Okay.
there's a lot of like content out there, like travel content and increasingly sustainability content. But I think really by also making this an educative experience for the traveler in terms of what they can look for when they look for sustainable experiences, we hope to define that, very clearly front and center. And coming back to the AI
Mm-hmm.
question, I mean, I get that AI can, go through all this information on the internet and, kind of create a summary of everything out there. But I think like one, it can never replace the lived experience. So especially with like these storytellers being really familiar with these cities, I don't think AI could ever just look at information online and kind of replicate that human touch or that lived experience. And secondly, a lot of the information that ChatGPT, for example, finds online is just what else is out there. And like we already discussed, a lot of those perspectives are people, parachuting in for a couple of days and sharing, their stories, which I guess have a space in travel
Right.
writing as well. But I guess what we are trying to do differently is really present a different perspective of each city, from the perspective of people who've lived there for, the last several years. And I don't think that AI can challenge that.
Right. Someone asked me this very question a couple of weeks ago when I was sitting on the other side of the podcast, and they were asking me what I think of how sustainability coverage has improved or evolved in travel media today since the pandemic, and what I think. And I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. So, I think there are two aspects to it. I think on the positive side, there's definitely a lot more awareness now that, sustainability needs to be part of the conversation. And so I think both like publications and writers feel the pressure to talk a lot more about sustainability, which is good in a way. But I think it's also a challenge because a lot of, I mean, there's still like the understanding of what sustainability means, both environmentally and socially. I think that's something that's still evolving. And so sometimes we see stories which are kind of almost like half baked narratives, which, they refer to sustainability, but not necessarily deeply understand it. And I think that can be a challenge because as travel media, it is our job that, we simplify all the jargon for travelers and really, make it accessible and more understandable for them.
Yeah.
And at the same time position it as something not just that, it's the need of the hour, but also it's a more immersive way and it's a more transformational way to travel. So really position it as something aspirational rather than something that is our responsibility now. So I think there's we still have a fair way to go. I'm curious to hear what your answer was.
Yeah. Actually, my answer was very close. I said that I do see improvement in terms of it being, spoken of, and an effort to make travel more conscious in terms of the stories. But at the same time, I think that a lot of the model of tourism is not set up to push for sustainability. So a lot of the press strips are still not, sustainability focused or focused. And when I say sustainability, I mean also from a social standpoint. I think there's still a lack of understanding within the industry. So I don't think that as long as the industry doesn't understand it, I'm not sure that the product is going to be better in terms of the stories. Unless they come from folks who live there or who go there often to the destination. I do see some improvement, but I think definitely it's a long way to go. And like you said, as long as we're focused on simplifying and word counts, eh, you know, how much can we really get across? I don't know, but we try. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So, and the same goes for sustainability in terms of, yes, consumers are checking off all the right boxes in surveys. Everyone's quoting Expedia and Booking.com. um, but how do you think your site, Sustainable Cities, will influence behavior? Is that something you're focused on, or are you really only going about after those who are already looking for conscious travel?
I think we're trying to do a little bit of both. So, of course, behavioral change is hard. But I think even the fact that, if someone starts, obviously, if people start Googling eco friendly things to do in certain parts of the world, we definitely want to be found and make those ideas very easy to access. But we also want to be found, on platforms that travelers hang out. So, for example, on Instagram, we want to challenge both in terms of what travel content could look like. So the kind of stories that you'll see on the Sustainable Cities Instagram channel will kind of challenge that narrative of, that travel is just about pretty pictures, but actually, it's so much more than that. So every story that we post on the Instagram channel is something that supports. It supports sustainability, but it doesn't have to say as much. It's really about immersive experiences and experiences that travelers should seek out. And hey, by the way, they are sustainable as well. So yeah, we really want to reach both sets of audience, both people who already are looking for conscious ideas and people who maybe are still on that journey to realize that there's a better way that we can travel. But also, I feel like many travelers, at least the ones that I've been interacting with online, I feel like people do want to make better choices, but there are often constraints. So access to ideas is one of them. I think like the price points is one of them as well. A lot of times we find that sustainable experiences are more expensive, and there is a reason for that. But not everyone can afford that. And recently, like I or last year actually, I did like a land journey from all the way from Switzerland to the Arctic. So the goal was really to take trains all the way.
Okay.
And I realized that actually we spent
Okay.
way more money on that overland trip as compared to just hopping on a cheap flight and saving all that time and getting from
Yes.
Switzerland to Norway. And so there are like real barriers to
Right.
sustainability, even in a place like Europe, for example, which is way more connected than the rest of the world.
Right. And even time, I mean, that's more time to be slow traveling, which not everybody
Absolutely.
necessarily has
Way more time.
because and so you have one tourism board partner so far, right? Tell me a little bit about how that model works, of how you plan to
Mhm.
partner with tourism boards. Are they sponsoring the site, or what's the partnership there?
Yeah, so I think tourism boards and like DMOs are a really essential component of the website because the goal is really to bring together DMOs from cities around the world or like national DMOs representing the cities, as well as local storytellers, because that's a link that's often been missing in the travel narrative because DMOs tend to work with travel writers all over the world, but not storytellers who are based locally. So that's a bridge that we are trying to create. And then with the platform, we also like one of our funding sources is the DMOs. So the DMOs help fund the website as well as help us pay the storytellers because we want to be able to pay a fair fee to everyone who writes for us, as well as who works with our social media team and so on.
I was going to ask about that. Okay.
But we're also looking at other sources of funding. So, for example, we're looking at, maybe forging relationships with small and medium businesses small and medium-sized businesses that already, have a sustainability focus, but maybe don't have the kind of voice and presence that they should. So, really helping them amplify their digital presence as well. And then, yeah, we'd love to work with more tourism boards, and we're also exploring other sources of funding. So it's still very much in the initial stage right now.
So speaking of cities, and I mean, a lot of them, as we know, are grappling with the same issues from pre-pandemic, notably overcrowding, and that's certainly coming back this summer. And I remember even I think it was last year I was in Amsterdam in the fall, early fall, and it was I mean I couldn't believe how many people were on the street and pushing my way through the sidewalk. So is that a topic that you plan to address? And how do you do that in a way that doesn't discourage people from visiting places, but at the same time offers them a choice?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's something that we've talked about at length, both with some of the DMOs that we are speaking to, as well as within the team. And I think there are two ways that we are looking at this. So one is that obviously like over tourism is a huge issue, and one would have thought that after the pandemic things would change, but actually we've gone right back to pre-pandemic
Right.
levels, like you said. Um,
Yeah.
but what we are trying to do is that first, understanding that people who want to travel to a certain place in the summer are going to do that anyway. So if people are planning to, if someone is planning to go to Amsterdam in the summer, chances are that they're going to go there anyway. And so what we can do is sort of nudge them towards more conscious experiences, nudge them towards accommodations that support the local community, that support the environment and experiences as well. But then the other thing that we are trying to do a little bit more subtly is to also kind of draw people in with Amsterdam, but also nudge them to places which are away from Amsterdam, from a local perspective, and kind of say that hey, it's great to be in Amsterdam, but you can also take like a couple of days away and go outside the city and have all these experiences outside the city. So, for example, if you read the cycling in Amsterdam guide on sustainable travel on sustainable cities, you'll find that a lot of those cycling routes are actually outside the city, and that's done intentionally to kind of
Mm.
encourage people to go beyond just the city limits and experience a little bit of the countryside as well. But that is a challenging question, and I don't think we
Yeah.
have all the answers yet.
Yeah. I don't think anybody does. It's incredible. So let's talk about just one example of a story that you love that is currently on your site, sustainablecities.travel. So give me an example of a particular blog or a story that you think is a great example of what you're trying to do.
I guess I have quite a few to pick from, but one of the stories that I really enjoyed reading was about slow fashion in Bangkok. So Bangkok, as you know, is like the fashion capital, the fast fashion capital of Southeast Asia or Asia in general. And we got in touch with the local storyteller who's been living in the city for the last I think 10-15 years, and she's been a sustainable fashion advocate for a really long time, has a great presence on Instagram and so forth. And so she helped us create like this like a very interesting guide to slow fashion in Bangkok. So she talks about how she went and lived with like weavers on an organic farm, and that's one of the only organic cotton farms in Thailand. And they have their own it's like a Thai brand now, where you can buy organic clothes that also support that are also
Mm-hmm.
fair trade and so on. And so it's a completely different perspective of experiencing Bangkok. And then she talks about like these thrift events that are held within the city by different organizations. So even as a traveler, you can go and take
Right.
clothes that maybe you don't wear anymore or you're not fond of anymore, and exchange
Yeah.
them with mostly locals. So it's a great way to meet locals and
Ah,
connect over
great. Love it.
over fashion, but also over sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
So so yeah, I think she's done a really
Yeah.
great job
That's
of sharing
fantastic.
some of these experiences which come from her. Yeah, which and she talks about how it's not just her but also
Yeah.
her teenage
I
daughter. And so I love the perspective that she brings as a mom as well.
uh, nice. Yeah, I love the fashion angle. I think that's something that's often overlooked in so many places. And I mean, even where I was just now in Rwanda, the number of just local tailors that are there ready to make clothes from traditional fabrics versus going and buying a T-shirt that says "Visit Rwanda," you know, those are like little details, but it really makes a difference to your trip. And then you come back with a customized item, you know. So I love that too. I love that angle. There's so many angles to be explored. So I'm very excited to see
Yeah,
where you take this. I don't know what your
yeah,
next cities are. Do
absolutely.
you want to just give us a little teaser?
So we have Cape Town going up really soon, and I think we are probably going to have
Okay.
Portland, Oregon, go up really soon as well. So those are the two
Oh,
to look out for
great.
this month.
I'd love to see some African cities on there. That would be great. I think that sustainability when it comes to Africa is still a topic that isn't really discussed that much, other than environmental sustainability. And I think social sustainability is huge there, and there's a need. So I hope you do more African cities for sure.
Definitely, definitely.
Thanks so much, Shivya. It was great having you here today and for sharing your Sustainable Cities project. Everybody, check it out. DMOs, travelers. I'll definitely be looking that up to see if my next city is on there, and I look forward to seeing it expand.
Thank you so much, Lily. Thanks for having me on the podcast. Lovely speaking with you, and I hope people find a lot of ideas for their next trip on sustainable cities.
Sounds great to me. Take care.
Bye.